She told me I was too focused on building a secure future instead of living in the moment. I smiled, signed the promotion agreement, and doubled my investment strategy. She reached out when moments didn't build stability. You're going to wake up one day and realize you spent your whole life preparing to live, and you never actually did it. She said that on a Tuesday where I had just gotten off a 12-hour shift, made dinner, and was sitting at the kitchen table reviewing my investment portfolio before bed. She stood in the doorway of our apartment in a silk robe, arms crossed, looking at me like I was something she had stepped in. Not anger exactly, more like disappointment wearing anger's clothes. I looked up from my laptop. She didn't look away, and I remember thinking, not for the first time, that this conversation was going to cost me something. I just didn't know yet what I was willing to pay. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. I was 29. She was 27. We had been together for 3 years, living together for 1. I worked in financial consulting. She worked as a brand partnerships manager for a lifestyle company, the kind of job where your Instagram grid was basically part of your resume. On paper, we made sense. In the apartment at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, we made a lot less sense. Vivian, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm almost done. You're always almost done, she said. She walked to the couch and tucked her feet under her, the way she always did when she was preparing for a long conversation. I closed the laptop, not because I was done, because I had learned, early on, that leaving it open during these moments was its own kind of declaration. Okay, I said. I'm listening. She looked at the closed laptop, then back at me. Do you even remember the last time we did something spontaneous? I thought about it, genuinely thought about it, because I didn't want to give her a wrong answer that I couldn't back up. We went to that rooftop thing last month, I said. That was Derek's work event. You went because your boss was there. That doesn't count. She wasn't wrong. I had calculated that attending would be good for a conversation I wanted to have with my director the following week. It had worked, by the way, but that wasn't the point she was making. What do you want to do? I asked. She shook her head slowly, like the question itself had offended her. I don't want you to do something because I asked you to do it, she said. I want you to want to do it. I sat back. This was the version of the argument that I couldn't really counter because it wasn't about behavior. It was about desire. And she was right, in a way she probably didn't fully understand. I didn't desire spontaneous trips or last-minute dinners at restaurants with 2-week wait lists. I desired stability. I desired watching numbers grow. I desired waking up 10 years from now and not being afraid of what my bank account said. That wasn't something she could hand me, and it wasn't something I could perform. So I said the most honest thing I could. I'm building something, Viv. She looked at me for a long time. I know, she said quietly. I just don't know if I'm in the blueprint. That sentence lived in the apartment with us for about a week. It sat on the kitchen counter with the unopened mail. It hovered over breakfast. It followed us to bed, where we slept close but not touching, the way you sleep when you're trying not to start a fight, but you haven't finished the last one. I thought about what she meant. I tried to understand if it was a critique or a warning. In my experience, there's a difference. A critique means someone wants you to change. A warning means they've already started to leave, and they're giving you the chance to see it before it becomes official. I wasn't sure which one she was giving me. So I did what I always do when I'm uncertain about something I can't quantify. I watched. I listened more carefully than I spoke. I paid attention to the small things, where she put her energy, who she texted, what she talked about when she was excited. And what I noticed was this. She had started talking a lot about a guy named Felix. Not in a suspicious way. In the way people talk about someone who makes them feel understood. Felix says the best decisions he's ever made were the ones he didn't overthink. Felix and some of the team went to Lisbon last minute. Isn't that so fun? Felix has this philosophy about collecting experiences instead of things. Felix, I gathered, was a creative director at a company that partnered with hers. Felix, I gathered, was the kind of person who talked about philosophy at networking events. Felix, I gathered, was everything she was describing when she said she wanted someone who lived in the moment. I didn't say anything about Felix, because there was nothing to say, technically, but I noted it. The way you note a shift in weather before the forecast confirms it. 2 weeks after the Tuesday conversation, I got a call from my director. His name was Conrad, and he was the kind of man who had made every decision I was trying to make about 15 years ahead of me. He said my name once, professionally, and then he said, "We want to move you into the senior consultant role. We've been watching your work for a while. The numbers you put together for the Hardrove account were the cleanest analysis we've seen from someone at your level. This comes with a significant compensation adjustment and some equity structure I want to walk you through. I sat very still. I had been working toward this for 2 years. Not hoping for it. Working for it, specifically. Late nights. Skipped vacations. The rooftop party I attended not for fun, but for the right conversation at the right time. I said, I'm very interested. When can we meet? We scheduled for the following Friday. I didn't tell Vivian that night. Not because I was keeping it from her, but because I wanted to sit with it alone first, the way you do with something you've earned. I wanted to feel it without it being filtered through someone else's reaction. I told her Thursday evening. She was making tea, her back to me. Conrad offered me the senior role. I said, I'm signing Friday. She turned around. Her face did something complicated. That's wow. Congratulations. It was the right thing to say. It just didn't feel like the right thing to mean. You don't seem excited, I said. I am, she said quickly. I'm proud of you. But then, a beat later, quieter. Does this mean more hours? And there it was. The real question folded inside the polite one. It means more responsibility, I said carefully. For the first few months, probably yes. But the compensation. I'm not asking about the compensation, she said. Her voice wasn't sharp. It was tired. And there's a version of tired that's worse than anger. It's the kind that comes after someone has had the same argument so many times that they've stopped putting effort into having it well. Viv, I'm happy for you, she said again, and turned back to her tea. I stood there for a moment. Then I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and started reading through the equity breakdown Conrad had emailed me. I signed the promotion agreement on a Friday afternoon. Conrad shook my hand in his office on the 41st floor. The city was spread out behind him in the way cities look from high enough up. Orderly, geometric, like someone had planned everything and the plan had mostly worked. He walked me through the new structure. Base increase of 31%. Performance bonuses tied to portfolio outcomes. Stock options with a 4-year vest schedule. I nodded, asked the right questions, took notes in the margins the way Conrad had taught me without meaning to, precisely, without flourish. When I left his office, I took the stairs down 2 floors, sat in an empty conference room, and just breathe for a minute. That's the thing about achieving something you've been chasing. It doesn't explode into celebration. It settles, like something clicking into place that had been slightly misaligned for years. I thought about calling my dad. Then I remembered he'd been the one to tell me, when I was 19 and working 2 jobs to save for my first investment, that nobody was going to build my future for me. That the people who waited for the right moment usually waited too long. That patience and preparation were not the same as not living. I thought about calling Vivian. I didn't. I went back to my desk, updated the investment allocations I'd been sitting on for 2 weeks, and doubled the automatic contributions to 2 of my index funds now that the income structure made it feasible. Then I texted her, signed, going to be a good year. She sent back a heart emoji. Just the one. The next month was a particular kind of hard. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just a slow, steady friction, like 2 pieces of material rubbing together that don't quite fit. She started staying out later. Not suspiciously late, but late in the way that someone stays out when home doesn't feel like where they want to be. She'd come in around 11, sometimes midnight, smell like wine and good conversation, and I'd be at my desk or already in bed. She'd see the light on under the office door and not knock. I noticed. I always noticed. But I also knew that any conversation we had at midnight when she'd been drinking would be the worst possible version of a conversation we needed to have carefully. So I waited. I told myself I was being strategic. And maybe I was. Or maybe I was just scared of what she was going to say if I gave her the room to say it. The actual conversation happened on a Saturday morning. She was standing in the kitchen again. She'd made coffee, which was unusual. I was normally the one who made the coffee, and she was holding her mug with both hands, staring at the window. I came in, saw her posture, and knew. You learn to read people you love at a cellular level. The way her shoulders were set. The stillness. It was the stillness of someone who has decided something and is now just managing the timing. Hey, I said. Hey. She didn't turn around. Coffee's ready. I poured a cup, stood beside her, waited. Outside the window, the city was doing its Saturday thing, quieter than a weekday, but not quiet. I've been thinking, she said. I figured, I said. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were clear, not puffy, which meant she hadn't been crying. She'd been thinking. There's a difference, and the difference matters. I love you, she said first. which is the thing people say when what comes next is going to hurt. But I don't think this is working. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I had already been standing in the wreckage of this for weeks, and hearing the words didn't move me the way they should have. That probably said something too. Is this about the hours? I asked. It's about us, she said. It's about who we are. I don't think we want the same things. What do you want? I asked. And she told me. She wanted someone who would book a flight on a Thursday for a weekend they hadn't planned. She wanted someone who could put the laptop down and mean it. She wanted someone who got excited about an experience the way I got excited about a percentage point. She wanted, she said, to actually live. And she said it without cruelty. That was the thing that stayed with me. She wasn't angry, wasn't trying to wound me. She genuinely believed it. She believed I was missing something essential, and she felt sad for me about it. That's the version of being left that does something strange to your chest. Not heartbreak exactly. More like being handed a verdict by someone who thought they were doing you a kindness. Is there someone else? I asked. The question sat between us. She looked at the window again. Not officially, she said. Not officially. Two words that do a tremendous amount of work. Not officially meant there was someone. Not officially meant it hadn't crossed into territory she was willing to call by its name. Not officially meant Felix. I didn't say his name. I just nodded. Okay, I said. She looked back at me, and for a second I saw something cross her face. Surprise, maybe. She had expected a fight. Or she had expected me to try to argue her back. And I thought about it. I thought about saying, you don't understand what I'm building. You don't understand that the person who books a flight on a Thursday is also the person who can't afford the mortgage when the market turns. You don't understand that what you're calling not living is the thing that means neither of us has to panic when something goes wrong. I thought about all of that. And then I looked at her face, really looked at it, and I understood. She didn't know. She understood exactly what I was building. She just didn't want to live in a building while it was under construction. She wanted the version of life that was already finished. The version that looked good and felt easy and had someone like Felix in it, talking about collecting experiences. And I couldn't give her that. Not yet. Maybe not ever, in the way she meant it. So I said, I hope you find what you're looking for. And I meant it. Which, I think, was the last honest thing we said to each other for a very long time. She moved out within 3 weeks. Efficiently, actually. She had always been good at logistics when she was motivated. She took the things that were hers and left the things that were mine with clean precision. She left a succulent on the kitchen windowsill that we had bought together, and I didn't know if that was a gesture or an oversight. I watered it anyway. The apartment felt different immediately. Not empty exactly. Quieter in a way that was both painful and clarifying. Like a noise you had stopped hearing because it was always there, and then it stops, and you realize it had been taking up space. I won't pretend I didn't sit on the couch some nights and just feel it. I did. I'm a person. I had loved her, and loving someone for 3 years doesn't just conclude the way a contract does. It lingers in muscle memory. In the way you still reach for your phone to tell them something funny that happened at work. In the way the bed feels geometrically wrong. But I also noticed something else during those first weeks. I was productive in a way I hadn't been in months. Not because I was numbing myself with work, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't spending energy managing someone else's unhappiness with my choices. I wasn't performing casualness I didn't feel. I wasn't closing the laptop because someone was standing in the doorway with their arms crossed. I worked. I studied the new portfolio structures my role gave me access to. I started meeting with a private wealth advisor named Mr. Alyawadabi who a colleague had recommended, a quiet, precise man with an almost irritating patience for detail who saw things in numbers the way some people see things in paintings. We restructured 3 of my longer horizon positions. We added exposure to 2 sectors I had been underweight in. We had a very long conversation about timeline, risk tolerance, and the difference between being conservative and being afraid. He said, at the end of our second meeting, you have unusual clarity about what you want for your age. I thought about Vivian saying I was too focused on building a secure future instead of living in the moment. I've had some practice, I said. 6 months passed. Then 9. I settled into the senior role the way you settle into a better-fitting version of something you already knew how to do. The team I managed was small but sharp. There was a woman named Theodora who had the best instincts for risk I'd seen in someone who had been in the industry for less than 4 years. There was a man named Callum who was meticulous to the point of being occasionally infuriating, but whose reports were the cleanest in the firm. I learned their working styles and I adjusted mine. Not in the way I had adjusted with Vivian. where adjusting felt like subtracting from myself. But in the way you adjust when you're building something together, and the adjustment makes the structure stronger. I was good at this. I had always been good at this. And for the first time, I was in an environment that didn't treat that as something to apologize for. I ran into a mutual friend of ours at a coffee shop in November. Her name was Olivia, someone who had been more Vivian's friend than mine, but who had always been kind to me in that genuine, uncomplicated way some people have. She looked slightly uncomfortable when she saw me. Then she just smiled and said, "Hi, you look well." "You too," I said. "How's everything?" We did the polite navigation for a moment. Then she said, carefully, "Are you doing okay? After everything?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm good." "Really?" She studied me. "Good," she said. She's okay too, just so you know. She and Felix, they went to Lisbon." She watched my face when she said it. I kept it even. "Good," I said. "I hope they had a good trip." Olivia nodded slowly. Then she said something I didn't expect. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I always thought she didn't really see what she had." I looked at her. "She said you were boring," Olivia continued. "But I always thought what she called boring, other people would call reliable." I didn't know what to say to that. So I said thank you, and meant it, and we went our separate ways. Reliable. I turned that word over in my head for the rest of the day. She had said boring. Olivia had said reliable. Same behavior, two different readings. That's the thing about who you are that nobody tells you when you're young. It isn't just what you are. It's who's doing the interpreting. The year ended better than I had projected. Not just financially, though the numbers were better than my conservative estimate by enough that Mr. Alyawadabi allowed himself a small, satisfied nod when we reviewed the year-end summary. But in other ways too. I had learned to cook 3 new things I actually liked making. I had started reading again. Not professional development, just books, the kind you read because the thinking inside them is worth sitting with. I had taken one solo trip, just 4 days, to a city I had never been to because a colleague mentioned it in passing and something about the description stayed with me. I didn't book it spontaneously. I planned it 2 months out because I like having things to look forward to. But I went, and I liked it. And I came back feeling like someone who had, in fact, been living, just differently from how she had wanted me to. The message from Vivian came on a Wednesday in March, 14 months after she moved out. I almost didn't recognize the notification at first. We had not communicated since the week she moved out, which had been brief and logistical. The message said, "Hey, I know this is probably weird. I just wanted to see how you're doing. Hope work is going well." I read it 3 times. Not because it was complicated, because I was trying to understand what it was. Was it guilt? Was it curiosity? Was it something that had happened with Felix, with the Lisbon version of the life she had wanted, that had shifted something? I didn't respond that day, not out of strategy. I just genuinely didn't know what to say, and I had learned that silence is better than saying something you haven't thought through. I responded the next evening. "Hey, things are good. Work is going well. Hope you're doing okay too. Polite. True. Closed." She replied within minutes. "I'm glad. I've been thinking about reaching out for a while. Would you want to get coffee sometime? Just to catch up." I sat with that for a while. Just to catch up. There's a version of that sentence that's exactly what it says. And there's a version that means something else is happening, and this is the safest way to open a door. I thought about the rooftop event, the Tuesday at the kitchen table, the Saturday morning with the coffee. Not officially. I thought about the succulent on the windowsill, which had, improbably, not died. I thought about what I had built in 14 months, quietly, without anyone watching. And I wrote back, "I'm pretty slammed with work for the next few weeks. Let me know if things open up on your end and we can figure something out." Not a no, not a yes. The honest answer, actually, to the honest question she had asked. She messaged again 2 weeks later. This time, a little more directly. "I miss talking to you. I know that's strange to say. I just do." I read that one more than 3 times. Because something about it felt like a confession that had been sitting in her chest for a while. And I felt something, not nothing, because it would be dishonest to say I felt nothing. But it wasn't what I had expected to feel. It was more like the feeling of seeing an old map of a place you used to live. Recognition without the pull. I wrote back, "I think that's honest. I miss parts of it too. But I also think we were honest with each other about who we were. That doesn't really change." She didn't reply for 2 days. Then, "Things with Felix ended a few months ago. I'm not telling you that for any reason. I just feel like I should be transparent." And there it was. The real message inside the messages. I took my time. Then I wrote, "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you're doing okay." She wrote back, "I don't know if I am. I've been thinking a lot about what I had and what I walked away from. I looked at that sentence for a long time. And here's the thing that I want to be honest about, because this is the part where it would be easy to be unkind, and I'm not interested in being unkind. I understood what she was saying. I understood that she had built her case for leaving on a philosophy. Live in the moment. Don't sacrifice the present for a future that might not come, and that the philosophy had been tested and found wanting. Felix collected experiences. Felix booked flights on Thursday for weekends they hadn't planned. Felix was everything she had described wanting. And Felix, apparently, was not stable. Not in the way that paid rent. Not in the way that planned for the things that happen when the moments run out. And she was reaching out now, from the other side of that experiment, and I could see exactly what was happening. I want to be clear. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel the satisfaction that the story would suggest I should feel. I felt something more complicated. A kind of sadness that had nothing to do with her being wrong about me. She hadn't been wrong. I was focused on building a secure future. I was less interested in spontaneous weekends than in making sure there was a foundation under every decision I made. That was true then, and it was true now. But the thing she had missed, the thing Felix had apparently not delivered, was that a life built on pure spontaneity isn't living in the moment. It's gambling with them. And eventually, the house wins. I agreed to coffee. Not because I was considering getting back together. I want to be very clear about that. And I was clear about it with myself before I walked into the cafe where we agreed to meet. I agreed to coffee because I had loved her for 3 years, and because I'm not the kind of person who can be cruel to someone who is hurting, even if that hurting is the consequence of a choice they made. She looked good. She always looked good. But she also looked like someone who had been doing a specific kind of emotional labor. The kind where you have to reassemble your self-concept after realizing the story you told yourself about yourself wasn't entirely accurate. It's a hard thing to wear, and she was wearing it. We ordered. We did the opener. Work, mutual people we knew, the city. And then she looked at me and said, "I owe you an apology." I waited. I was patronizing, she said. When I talked about you not living your life, I was making myself feel better about wanting something I shouldn't have wanted. I turned your stability into a character flaw because it was easier than admitting I was just restless. I nodded. I appreciate you saying that, I said. I was wrong, she said. About what I thought I wanted. About what I thought I was leaving behind. There was a question underneath those words. The question was, is there anything left? I could hear it clearly. And I chose to answer the question she had actually asked, not the one underneath. You weren't entirely wrong, I said. I was pretty locked in. I'm still pretty locked in, honestly. I've just gotten better at it. She looked at her coffee. Are you happy? She asked. Yeah, I said. I think I am. She looked up. I wasn't sure you would be. You thought I needed you to be happy, I said. It wasn't accusatory. It was just the most accurate thing. She considered that. Maybe, she said quietly. Maybe that was part of it too. We talked for about an hour. It was honest in a way our conversations rarely were when we were together. She told me about what had happened with Felix, not in detail, but in the shape of it. He had been exciting and then exhausting. He had been present and then inconsistent. He had talked about the future in beautiful, unanchored terms that sounded like poetry and functioned like fog. She had realized, she said, about 6 months in, that there was no plan, that the spontaneity wasn't a lifestyle philosophy. It was just the absence of discipline dressed up in good lighting. I kept waiting for him to become the person he presented himself as, she said. And I finally understood that he was already that person. The presentation was the whole thing. I didn't say I could have told you that, even though I probably could have, because saying it wouldn't have been kind, and it wouldn't have been useful, and some versions of being right don't need to be performed. What are you doing now? She asked. Career-wise. I told her about the senior role, about Mr. Alyawadabi and the restructured portfolio, about Theodora and Callum and what the team was building. Her eyes changed as I talked, not in the way they had in the apartment, with that complicated cocktail of pride and dread, just genuinely, like she was hearing something for the first time. You're really building something, she said. Yeah, I said. I've been telling you that. She laughed, a small, slightly sad laugh. You have, she said. At the end of the coffee, she asked if we could do it again sometime. I said maybe, not to be evasive, but because I genuinely didn't know yet. I liked her. I had always liked her. But the thing about being broken up with for your values is that getting back together means one of two things. Either they've changed, or you have. And I hadn't changed. Not fundamentally. I was still the person who sat at the kitchen table on a Tuesday reviewing investment allocations. I was still the person who calculated that attending a rooftop event was strategically useful. I was still the person who found more satisfaction in watching a portfolio grow than in booking a flight on a Thursday for a trip I hadn't planned. I was that person. I was comfortable being that person. And I needed to know, really know, whether she was okay with that person now because she'd seen the alternative or because she had genuinely come to understand something she hadn't before. Those are two very different foundations. And I'd spent enough time studying foundations to know that the one underneath you matters more than anything you build on top. Olivia texted me a week after the coffee. She told me you two met up. She seemed lighter after. I wrote back, I'm glad. Olivia, are you going to give it another shot? Me, I don't know yet. Olivia, for what it's worth, she gets it now. What she had. I thought about that. Then I wrote, getting it now and being right for each other are different things. Olivia, that's very wise and also slightly annoying. Me, I've been told. She and I messaged occasionally over the next 2 months. Not constantly. Not in the breathless, gravitational way of early relationships. More like people who are being careful. Who are, perhaps, conducting a different kind of due diligence on each other. She told me she had started a financial literacy course. Not because she needed to, she said, but because she wanted to understand things she had always considered my territory. I thought that was interesting. She told me she had been promoted, her own version, different industry, real recognition for work she'd been quietly building for years. I told her I was proud of her, and I meant it. She said, you always said the work was there. I just had to let it be seen. I didn't remember saying that, but it sounded like something I would have said. She asked me once, in a message, whether I had been seeing anyone. I told her there had been a few dates, nothing serious. She said, anyone you're interested in? I said, someone I'm thinking about. She said, oh, a long pause. Then, can I ask who? I didn't answer right away, because the answer was complicated. And because I am the person who doesn't say the unfinished thing. I called her on a Sunday. Not a text. A call, which felt different in a way that was deliberate. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said. Hey, I said. I wanted to say something. Okay. I've been thinking about us, I said. About what you said at coffee and what I've been trying to figure out since then. She was quiet. Good quiet. Listening quiet. I'm not going to change, I said. I want to be clear about that up front. I'm still going to be the person who reviews the portfolio on Tuesday night. I'm still going to plan things instead of booking them spontaneously. I'm still going to care about foundations more than moments. That's who I am. I know, she said. I need you to be okay with that, I said. Not tolerant of it. Actually okay with it. Because if you're coming back because Felix didn't work out and I feel familiar and safe, I'm not interested in that. That's not fair to either of us. She took a long breath. That's the most direct you've ever been with me, she said. I've learned some things, I said. I'm not coming back because Felix didn't work out, she said. I'm reaching out because I spent 14 months being honest with myself and I didn't like all of what I found. I told you that you weren't living, but I was the one who couldn't sit still long enough to actually see what was being built. I mistook your patience for passivity. That was my error, not yours. I listened. I'm not saying I'm fixed, she said. I'm not even saying I know exactly what I want, but I know I was wrong about what I thought was wrong with you. And that's where I'm starting from. I thought about foundations, about what goes under things before you can build on top of them. Okay, I said. Okay, she said. Let's have dinner, I said. A real one. Not coffee. Dinner. When? Friday, I said. I'll make a reservation. She laughed. Of course you will, she said. And it was the first time in a long time that it didn't sound like a complaint. I went back to the kitchen table that night, opened the laptop, checked the portfolio, the numbers that had been quietly growing for 14 months while everything else had been reshuffling. Mr. Aluwatabi and I had a meeting the following week. The year-to-date return was sitting at something that made me lean back in my chair and allow myself a moment of the specific satisfaction that comes from watching a long-held thesis prove itself out. I thought about the Tuesday when she had stood in the doorway and told me I was preparing to live instead of living. I thought about the Friday when I signed the promotion agreement. I thought about doubling the investment contributions. I thought about the months of quiet work, the solo trip, the team I was building, the version of myself that had room to breathe because it wasn't constantly apologizing for existing. And I thought about Friday, the dinner, the conversation we were going to have, honestly, carefully, without performing anything. I thought about how the best decisions are not the ones made in moments. They're the ones made from a position of stability, from a foundation strong enough to support weight, from somewhere you actually built. The succulent on the kitchen windowsill had grown, not dramatically, but perceptibly, in the slow and unremarkable way that things grow when you remember to give them what they need. It had sent out a small new arm since the spring. Nothing that announced itself, just more of what it was. I looked at it for a minute. Then I turned off the kitchen light, went to my desk, and finished what I had been working on. There's a version of this story where I say I told her so, where I lay out all the ways the numbers proved me right and the spontaneity proved her wrong. But I don't think that's the story. The story is that two people wanted different things, and one of them was honest about it, and the other one had to live their version of the answer to find out whether they were asking the right question. The story is that stability isn't the opposite of living. It's what makes living possible. The story is that you don't have to set fire to your foundation to prove you're not afraid of the dark. Some people build because they're afraid. Some people build because they know what happens when there's nothing to hold the weight. I built because I knew, and I kept building. And when she came back not to someone who had softened into something easier. She came back to the same person, because that's the only person I had to offer. And for the first time, that was enough. Not because she had settled, but because she had finally understood what she was looking at. Friday dinner came. The restaurant was good, not showy, but considered. The kind of place where the lighting was right and the menu had been thought about. We sat across from each other. She looked like herself, the version of herself that wasn't performing anything. We ordered. We talked. Not about the past. Not about Felix or the apartment or the Tuesday in the kitchen. We talked about what was in front of us. What we both wanted from the next chapter. At one point she leaned forward slightly and said, "I looked up your firm's recent press. The Hargrove account analysis got mentioned in a trade publication." I looked at her. "Did you read it?" I asked. "I read all of it," she said. 3 times. I wanted to understand what you were doing. Something shifted in my chest. Not dramatically, but perceptibly, like a foundation accepting weight it was built for. "And," I said, "and I think you're really, genuinely good at something that matters," she said. "And I think I spent 3 years not understanding that because I was too busy wanting you to be something different." I looked at her across the table. The city moved outside the window behind her. And for the first time in a long time, the moment didn't feel like something I was building toward. It felt like something I was actually in, which, I think, is the closest I've come to proving her wrong. Not by arguing, not by performing spontaneity I didn't feel, but by staying exactly who I was, long enough for the right version of the question to finally get asked. Stay consistent. Stay building. The foundation you're laying now is what determines what you can hold later. The people who are meant to be in your life will eventually find a way to understand what you're doing, or they'll find out the hard way that they should have. And either way, the blueprint survives.